Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here, and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we're going to be doing a one layer card. It's kind of like mixed media. We're going to be using some Zig Clean color markers and Copic markers. So I have a little helper here today. You might notice some tiny little hands. I am using the Hi Honey stamp set, the Beehive stamp set, and then the Spring Peonies. And this card, I feel like I made it forever ago, and it's just kind of been lying in wait to be edited, honestly. But so I stamped it all out so I could make sure that I had what I wanted. And that's what this piece is here. This is like my little practice piece. I didn't do any masking or anything like that. I just stamped everything one right on top of the other so I could see if I liked the layout. While I was doing this, this was very early in the morning, and my little peanut wanted to help. So you're going to see little teeny tiny hands in between here. First things first, when you're stamping a one layer card, now you don't have to do this a one layer card. I'm gonna be honest with you, there's dies for all of this stuff. So if you wanted to build the same exact card just with die cuts, you totally could, and you'd have a lot more like stand up dimension. But I like one layer cards. It's just they mail flat if I mailed things, but I don't. But also I just like the idea of turning this white piece of paper into this entire scene. So when you're stamping a one layer card, the first thing you want to do is stamp the thing that you want in the front. So the things that you want to see in their entirety, you don't want them to be behind anything. You stamp those first. And for me, that's going to be my little bees here. I basically, when I was doing this, the reason for the practice piece, outside of the fact that I could see where everything I wanted to go, this card has so many layers and so many parts to it that, oh, look at his little handy showing you the ink. Oh, I love him. Anyway, that it gives me a guide. So if you take the time to stamp out the practice piece, then you can just lay that right on top of your card base if you have a stamp positioner, like I do here with my Misty. And then you can just lay the stamps right exactly where you had them before. You know exactly where they're going to go. And then you can just move that piece out of the way to your blank piece of cardstock, stamp that, and then go from there. It makes it much easier. So now that our little bees are stamped, we're going to put the masks on. We did have a little bit of a struggle with this, just because it's kind of hard sometimes to get them a little bit lined up. And so he was having some trouble getting them down. You just have to be patient. And sometimes you have to kind of smush them in place. So you're not picking them up or anything, but you're like scooting them with your finger. And then you can get the lines lined up exactly where you want. If you don't get them lined up exactly, it's like, don't worry about it. This is really just so we can get the stamping done. And most of the time when you're stamping anyway with a masking, if the cardstock or if the masking paper you're using is a little bit thicker, you can sometimes get little gaps. I just fill them in with Copic Safe pens because typically I'm coloring with Copics. But it's not like a huge deal. It's not, life altering or anything. So here we're inking up the little hive. We're going to stamp that down because, again, this is the focal point like the flowers are as well, but they're really framing this beehive. Actually, I think I made this card. What were we doing? A bee hop? I think we were going to do a bee hop. And then my life happened and I didn't have a chance to participate. So I didn't get the card finished in time, but I still really loved the idea of the card. And so I just decided I was going to go ahead and finish making it anyway. So now that the hive is stamped, they have one little bee that looks like he's flying, like he's drawn to look like he's flying out of the hive. And so I'm going to stamp that down. There's no masking required here. If you mask the hive and then, stamp the bee, you'd be stamping the bee on the mask. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to stamp this little guy inside, and I didn't cut a separate mask for him because the hive will mask him by himself. You know what I mean? Like the entirety of the mask will cover him up. Then we're going to get into the framing portion. And since I want that beehive to be kind of the highlight of the card, my focal point, I positioned my flowers so that they are framing it kind of like a window. But then also you'll see with the coloring, there's another little trick we can use to draw attention to that beehive that you can use in maybe some of your other cards. So not just the layout, but also coloring techniques. So these are the peonies. Love them. Love, love, love them. anything that has to do with flowers. I mean, if you've seen any of my videos before, or followed my blog, or just if there's a flower to be had colored in some way, shape, or form, I am all down for that. Which is funny, because in real life, I don't plant flowers outside. I don't, when I like flowers in my house, like when Eric, or the last time I got flowers, actually, Nathan bought them for me. That was super funny. So they went to, what did they go for? Oh, the blower was broke. That's what it was. And while they were out, I asked him if he would pick up bread for me. So they went into Giant Eagle, and that's our grocery store. And when you walk into the grocery store, there's like the floral section is right there, looking right in your face. And apparently Peanut asked Eric if he could get me flowers, which is very, very sweet. And Eric was like, yeah, that's, it's been a while since, your mom got flowers. That's fine. We can buy her some flowers. And Nathan walks over to like the $35 rose bouquet. I want this one. And Eric's like, buddy, can we maybe come to some sort of compromise? Because your mother goes through these things so fast. Oh, here I'm showing you with the stems. I cut them too close. When I was doing the mask, I cut the stems too close, and then I realized I needed more of them. This is how lazy I am. I taped them back together. I did. I finished cutting out the rest of the stem, and then I taped it back together and trimmed off the tape so that I could still use it. Because that's how I roll, guys. So at this point, you can see my child is playing with my phone. He's starting to lose interest in the process at this point. So we're going to lose our helper here momentarily. Usually when I'm in the craft room, he likes to make his own things, but every once in a while, especially if the camera's on, he'll want to make my things. So I try to let him participate, as much as he can. So as far as like stamping would be fine, watercoloring is usually fine. It's the coloring when I have to do Copic coloring. I have to, like, it's not a choice. That's so funny. It is a choice, and I choose it all the time because I love that particular medium. But that one is the one that's hard to let him participate, and usually we will stamp him out a card so that he has something to color while mommy colors. So anywho, what were we talking about? Do you even remember? Because I don't. I'm feeling very rushed today. I am trying to do this voiceover before I go to work, and that is making me very anxious that I'm not going to have enough time to get this done and then get my tushy to work. I'm already cutting it close. I know that. So, just finishing out the stamping by myself. I'm solo here. And then, we're removing the mask. That's what we're doing. He kept yelling at me when I was, scolding me, I should say, when I was putting the magnets down on top of the card, because he would be like, you're crushing the bee. You put the magnet right on the bee. You're hurting the bee. I wasn't hurting the bee. The bee was fine. For the Zig Clean Color markers, I have people ask all this time, what should they start with? I have the 36 set, and then I just supplemented with other colors that I wanted. So total, I have about 46 markers, I think. So that worked for me. That I didn't feel like I'm missing anything out of those, those colors. And thankfully they sell them individually, so it's no big deal to just, pick up any color that I might need to supplement the collection I already have. Collection, couldn't think of the word. So basically with my clean color markers, whenever I'm doing a background like this is, I pretty much just scribble it on. It's not pretty. It's not, fancy. Doesn't take a lot of time. But it does, once you start to add water, it definitely looks less of a hot mess. So pretty much this is the coloring technique that's going to help make it a little bit more of like to gather your eye to the hive. And that's putting my darker colors on the outside edge. So it creates a lighter like halo around my focal point and is going to draw your eye to that. As far as putting the color down, I'm working with a number 8 round brush, and I just painted some clean clear water around the hive, and then from there I'm going to start moving out and moving the pigment. Here in a second I'm going to speed up the video because this card was very time consuming and I wanted you to be able to see the coloring. in its entirety, you know, I don't like chopping off part of the process. That's just not me, which is why I have 30-minute videos. But you know, if you don't need to see this part, or you need to skip ahead, or you're not interested in the Copic coloring, whatever it is, like, feel free to jump around. You're not going to hurt my feelings any. I know everybody has things that they need to be doing. So here, just spreading out that color out to that darkest blue, so that it pulls your, like I said, just, you know, pulls the eye's interest right into that, like, bullseye center. And then I wanted to do some green around the flowers, which just pretty much gives the illusion that those corners are fuller than they are, because that green's kind of peeking out from behind it. So your brain looks at it and kind of fills in that there's other leaves and greeneries and things that are back behind it. The other thing that you might notice that maybe up until this point you did not notice, because again, your brain just makes sense of things. Human mind is amazing. Well, the human body is also amazing. But anyway, I don't have my beehive attached to anything, guys. It's not. There's no branch. It's literally just stamped in the center of my card. But because of the way that everything puts together, you know, the way that it's arranged, your brain automatically assumes it's part of the flowers that it's closest to. Here, I wanted to add some more of that darker color. And when I want to do that, I just scribble my Zicklin color markers. I've never had good luck with putting them on wet paper. Like, the pigment just won't flow for me. So I typically scribble them off on a palette and acrylic block. In this case, I'm using the water media matte. So I just scribble them off and then pick it up with a paintbrush and drop it in, and that works really well for me. I'm going to go in with this lighter, I think is it beige? I think it's beige. I think that's actually the name of the color, to color my beehive. I told you in the beginning this is going to be mixed media. And it is, because I like the boldness and the dimension that I can get with Copic markers. But if you wanted a softer look, you could totally leave this just watercolored. And you'll see in its entirety, all watercolored with just that, and it's still super pretty. It doesn't necessarily have a lot of dimension because I didn't spend any time trying to shade it with my watercolors. You absolutely could, and then still get really good dimension. But I knew I was putting Copics on top of it, so really all I was doing was trying to get some base color down, because Copics are transparent. You can put down a color, whether that's watercolor or another color of Copic, not colored pencils. It won't work with colored pencils because most colored pencils are wax-based and Copics won't go over them. That wax creates a barrier. But other mediums, you know, where there's no protective layer between your one medium and another, that you can layer them. And so when I go over it with the reds that I've chosen, and the reason I chose red is because it's a natural complement to the blues and greens that I have going on in the background. Green and red are complementary colors, and so I knew the reds would really pop off the page, which is what I wanted, because I do like that bolder look. But you could definitely go with something softer if that was, you know, just kind of the wheelhouse you're living in. There's some like YouTube videos and stuff I watch, because I really honestly watch all kinds. I don't just watch card making videos. But there's a girl who is a I don't even know, is she an illustrator? She just really just draws, I think, for fun, and then has made a career out of YouTube, is what it appears to be. And she always is like, darker colors are scary, and I gravitate toward lighter colors. I like pastels. And I get darker colors are scary. I understand that. But to get any real kind of dimension or contrast, you kind of have to get on board with the darker colors sometimes. Here, I forgot to do the little bees' wings, and since they are transparent, you would see the color that's behind them shining through. So I am doing that, just, you know, filling in that color. Same thing with my leaves. I don't know why I skipped them the first time around, but I did. I don't know if you can hear this or not, but my dog is scratching at the door while I'm doing my voiceover. She doesn't actually need anything. She just wants to be where I am. But sometimes there's people that come down the street, or the neighbor takes out the garbage, and then she starts barking in the middle of my voiceover. And as I've already told you, I'm trying to get this done before I go to work, so I can't risk it. Cannot risk having her in here and having to pause it and start all over again. So she's just kind of out there on her own, scratching at the door, driving me crazy is pretty much what's happening here. So I apologize when I covered. Why are words hard? When I colored this little bud, I didn't realize in the editing that the like the 4 times was still on the sped up version. I will slow it down for the next flower, so it won't stay like this. It's just this one in particular. So speaking of the Copic coloring, let's talk about some shading and where we're adding shadows and why. Anytime that there is one object on top of another object, there's a shadow. Anytime that there is a point where 2 objects meet, there is typically a shadow. So even if you only ever follow those 2 rules, you will still have a dimension that makes sense. We've talked about before coloring things in the shape that they are. This is really important for flowers because they curl out. You know what I mean? They bloom out. I wish you could see me. I'm talking with my hands because I want you to understand what I'm saying. I want you to understand what I'm saying, and the best way for me to do that is to show you with my hands. But anyway, they bloom out. So because they're coming out all different directions from the center, that means your coloring should match the direction that the petal is drawn. If you just try to color them left to right or up and down, it's not going to give the same feel that following the shape of that petal would. So I'm going through, I'm doing the same thing I always do, lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. In this particular card, I believe my darkest color is going to be, is it R29? Or did I go all the way to R59? Because I can't remember. I told you I did this card a while ago. No, I think it is R29. I think that's going to be my darkest color, which is normally a little bit lighter than I would usually go. But there's a difference between warm reds and cool reds, and I wanted like tomatoey reds. I wanted reds that were really warm, so they were more on the orange side versus reds that are more on the cool side, which is more blue toned. And I know that that's difficult sometimes to envision, but if you look at let me try to think. If you look at a R05 compared to an R35, okay, I know that the numbers are different in the beginning, but if you look at those colors, like if you have them at home, just swatch them out, you'll see what I'm talking about. The R05 is a much more tomato red. It's got a lot more orange in it versus the R35, which has more blue in it and makes it a cooler tone. Here, I didn't really add too much shading to the edges. I pretty much just concentrated on adding the shading coming out from the center of the flower. Every once in a while, if there is a little like dip in the flower petal, that's what I'm doing here, I will add a little bit of shading there because it would look like it was torn or more, I guess like a more jagged edge. So I did try to accent those, but I did not add a ton of shading from the outside of the petals, which I do sometimes if I want my flower to look more open, like it's blooming outward. I leave the highlight of my flower kind of in the center of the petal. I did not do that this time. I just, like I said, concentrated on putting the shading in the middle. And then when we get there, like you can still see like all of those yellow and pink tones from where we put the watercolor down, and that's why we did that. That's why we did like the underpainting there, but it wasn't as bold as I wanted it to be. I probably should have gone over the flowers twice, to be honest with you, because usually with Zig Clean color markers, if I do a background or something, I usually do it twice so that the color is super bold. I didn't this time, and I kind of have some regrets about that. In order to fix that, I'm going to go back in with my Copics and do what they call glazing. So I'm going to put this yellow on top of the pink in some areas, or I'm sorry, on top of the red in some areas, and then I'm going to go in with a pink. It was a Y08 and an RV04, which are pretty bright colors, and then I'm going to add that to the flower. so that it's got all kinds of different colors going on in the petals. I'm going to finish coloring up the flowers off screen. Now that you've seen it, I've colored them all the same way, just like you've seen it here. First the red and then adding in the yellow and the pink. And then I'm going to move on to doing, I'm going to show you these little ones first. My bad. And the little ones pretty much are just from the base where it meets its stem. And then the lightest part is going to be on the edges. So Father's Day is coming up tomorrow. And if you watch my channel, you know that my dad has recently had some health problems. So I am super grateful to be able to celebrate another Father's Day with him. And we actually did that yesterday because I have to work all weekend. So we went over, and it's very interesting to me because you see people's interactions on, like Facebook and social media, or people personally. I am super blessed that I have two sisters and we're close. Like, we get along. We don't not like each other. And even over the years where maybe we've had like a little tiff or whatever, somebody always apologizes, the other person apologizes, and then we just move on with our lives. For the hive, when I color this, I'm pretty much just going to add some shading underneath those lines and inside the entryway that this bee is flying out of. It would be lightest around the edges where it was still getting some sun, and then darkest in the center. But anyway, so my sisters and I were trying to figure out what we were going to do for Father's Day. My dad did have to have another procedure this week, and we weren't sure if he was going to be feeling up to it, even though there were some scary kind of complications. He did feel good enough to go ahead and do that, and so we did. We went over there for dinner, and my mom cooks a certain way, okay? It's wonderful. It's delicious. I love my mother's cooking. But she's always cooked that way, and I think that she doesn't really know how to cook any other way. So now with this new situation that they're kind of in, trying to navigate something different is always scary and honestly frustrating. If you've ever been on a diet of any kind, or if you have ever had a health reason that you had to change the way that you eat, it is aggravating because it's like somebody else is trying to tell you what you need to do. But the reality of the situation is, like, you need to do it. That's, in order to be healthy. So my dad is also diabetic. So that's something else too. So in addition to like a heart healthy diet, to be aware of his blood sugar as well. And so just trying to figure out what to make between the three of us. This group text message was hysterical because we're like, what about chicken? What about fish? And I don't eat fish. I don't know how to cook fish. My sister suggested fish because my dad likes fish. But I was like, you're going to have to do that. Like, I will help you in any way that I can, but I don't know how to make it. I don't know how to do it. She was like, no, I got the fish. So we ended up doing like grilled chicken, roasted asparagus, and green beans. But I didn't know this. Like, my mom pretty much only eats green beans out of a can. Now, I know that's how she always made them when we were growing up, but I learned how to clean green beans and snap them and stuff out of the garden from my grandmother on my mom's side. So it didn't occur to me that she didn't really eat fresh green beans. I didn't know that. But I do. I love them. So, and if I can't get fresh ones, like, I use frozen. I never eat, like, when I make dinner for my family, I never make vegetables out of a can. I just don't, even though that's the way I grew up. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how, like, the things that, like, stay with you and then the things that don't? But so we went over there, and the three of us now the three of us obviously run households, right? And then trying to make dinner together. It was fine for the most part, but the timing was just so off. Like, oh, well, it'll only take 15 minutes. No, it didn't. No, it took 20. Or, so we didn't end up eating until late. And then typically I'm in charge of the dessert portion of our family get-togethers because I like baking. I really do. It's something that I enjoy doing. And before I had Peanut, it was what card making was. It was a de-stressor. I could go into the kitchen and I could bake something and try different recipes. And I just really, and decorate them. That's super fun. Like, I just really enjoyed that whole process. Now it's less now. I don't get to do it as often because, jobs, mom, all that stuff. But so I was like, well, I'm going to make these diabetic cupcakes and see how that goes, for my dad. So I decided I'm going to do chocolate cupcakes. My dad really likes chocolate on chocolate. I opted for like a turtle cupcake. So it was a chocolate cake, but it had a buttercream frosting and then like salted caramel drizzled on top and some pecans. That was our cupcake. And they were good. The taste was not bad. Let me be clear on that. But they did not rise. Not true. They did rise. They rose slightly in the oven. And then as soon as I took them out and let them cool so I could frost them, they completely deflated. They were so dense. There was no air in those cupcakes, y'all. There was none. There was no aeration in the cupcake whatsoever. So if you... Oh, can you hear her? She's barking. I don't have time to stop. You're just going to have to listen to it. I'm sorry. But so there was just none. There was no air. They were super dense. And even when I was like scooping them into the cupcake holders, it was like scooping like mousse or pudding. It was really, really thick. And then, yeah, that's how they baked, really thick. So, like I said, the flavor wasn't bad. And I used stevia. That was the sweetener that I used. But if you are, or you typically cook for, bake for somebody who's diabetic in your family, if you can help a sister out and tell me, like leave me a link to a recipe or tell me what kind of sweetener that you use in your baking, or if you have a really good recipe for, chocolate frosting or cream cheese. I love cream cheese frosting. Any of those things that would be super helpful to me. So I'm calling all heart healthy, sugar-free people in my life. I need some help there because I don't know. Maybe that's just the way they are. I'm not really sure, but it's the first time I've ever tried to make them. And I even, like, when I did the measurements, it said 1 teaspoon of stevia is the equivalent of 1 cup of sugar. And the recipe called for 2 cups of sugar. So I put in 2 teaspoons of stevia. And it did not seem like that would be accurate or enough. And do you know what? It wasn't. It tasted like trash. So I did have to adjust the recipe. And maybe that was my undoing, is that I adjusted the recipe to the amount of sweetness that I wanted. But that just doesn't, I don't know, those calculations don't seem right to me. Because like when Eric makes his coffee, he puts a whole packet in there and he's not putting a cup of sugar into his coffee cup. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, I'm going to stamp the sentiment, and I thought this was super cute. You're the bee's knees. So I'm going to stamp the you're the, which is in this beautiful script I totally love, right onto my card here. I'm just going to stamp it right down on there. And then for the bee's knees part of it, I am going to do some heat embossing. So I just have some black cardstock. I'm going to treat it with my embossing tool and then stamp in Versamark ink, which is just a sticky clear ink. There's a lot of different embossing pads out there. Versamark was just the first one that I ever bought back in the day. I think, when was it? It was the first embossing I ever did. I had no idea what I was doing. I did it with a blow dryer. I'm not kidding you. It will work. It's just going to take you 900 years. It was for my sister's wedding invitations. And she got married in 2003. So that was the first time I ever embossed anything. I didn't even make cards back then. I scrapbooked, but I didn't make cards. So here I'm using my Laura Basson trick of using the craft pick to just kind of clean up my embossing. Once I'm done with that, I'm going to use my heat gun to just heat it so it's all smooth and melted. It shouldn't be like granular at all. Then I'm going to use some foam tape, pop this bad boy up over my little flowers here. And the last thing that I did was I added some shimmer because you know everything needs shimmer. And so I put the shimmer definitely on the wings. Oh, I forgot to mention that I did use a white gel pen to like outline their wings. But then I put some shimmer on their wings and then also on the flowers in the background. And then that's it. That's the whole card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I know it was a long one. If you made it to the end, God bless you. And I will catch you on the next video. Bye.